I'm JD Cunegan, author of Notna and the Jill Andersen series, and today I will be reading you a chapter from my latest release, Betrayal, Book 5 in the Jill Andersen mystery superhero thriller series. Have I mentioned lately how bad an idea I think this is? Jill couldn't help but smile. Only about 10 times. Even when Ramon Gutierrez, her partner and best friend, was being an annoying little shit. He was endearing in his own way. And it wasn't as if she necessarily disagreed with him. Okay, she did disagree with him, but Jill understood his hesitance. Truth be told, no one thought this was a good idea. Not Ramon, not FBI Special Agent Richard McDermott, none of her former colleagues at the 7th Precinct, not even her brother. They all thought that going on camera, as Bounty, no less, would do little more than rile up the collective. Goad them into killing another victim. Maybe even her. And maybe they were right. Maybe, if she was properly distanced from the entire situation, Jill would agree with them. But as much as Jill loved her brother, his public response as assistant district attorney clearly hadn't had the desired effect. If it had, Police Commissioner Saunders wouldn't have been kidnapped. Agent McDermott had been downtown all day, coordinating with local and state officials to make sure the rest of the Baltimore Police Department's brass was safe. Rumor was that all remaining upper administration and every precinct captain would be whisked away somewhere secret. So secret that not even they knew where they were going. At least that was what Detective Stevens had said when he wasn't trying to talk Jill out of her latest WJZ cameo. If nothing else, it explained why Captain Richards was nowhere to be found in his own precinct building. Jill found herself oddly comforted in that fact. Whatever issues the two of them had, she didn't want them to fall into the collective's clutches. And she appreciated that he was still willing to look out for her brother. Just so long as he didn't spill any blood while doing it. Come on, Ramon, Jill teased with an elbow against his side. I thought you'd jump at the chance to return to our old stomping grounds. Ramon cringed. Even when Jill held back, the elbow in his ribs still hurt. Can they be old stomping grounds when we were just here 3 weeks ago? So this broadcast wasn't actually going to go through WJZ's airwaves. Using publicly accessible infrastructure like that ran the risk of their location being discovered. As FBI tech Castillo had put it, public airwaves were so easy to trace, Jill could have done it. It wasn't the most tactful way to make the point, but she got the idea. There was no telling how advanced the collective was. Sure, their broadcasts were grainy standard definition that would have been cutting edge in the late 1980s, but that could have been a ruse. After running the idea by Operation Flashlight's resident tech guru, Jill had decided to use the 7th Precinct's tech room instead. With Castillo in place, surrounded by 4 laptops, 3 of which were his, Castillo was able to boost the signal as far as it needed to go while simultaneously masking the trace, in case the collective tried to determine where they were. Castillo had explained how it all worked 3 times. But if there was one thing Jill never quite grasped, it was the intricacies of signal routing and video tracing. That was why people like Castillo existed. Jill just caught the bad guys. People like Castillo merely gave her the modern tools to do so. That wasn't to say Castillo's job wasn't vital, because it was. But Jill wasn't too proud to admit that half of everything he said flew right over her head. Being back at the 7th Precinct wasn't as awkward as Jill had feared, maybe because she had just been here 2 days prior. In fact, all the awkwardness came from what she was wearing. Standing in the bullpen she used to call home, Jill had shunned her FBI attire for something a little more... comfortable wasn't quite the right word, but she certainly felt more at home in this getup. The black leather that covered her from head to toe, the tactical armor hidden underneath, a welcome upgrade courtesy of her pay raise. Combat boots clomping against the hardwood floor. More importantly, the dark hair that framed her face and the silver eye plate on the left side, complete with infrared eye that in the right light could be intimidating. Get the lighting just right, and there was no telling what sort of look Jill could accomplish. She noticed the stares being directed her way as she approached the tech room. Former colleagues were sizing her up, and not all their gazes were approving. Bounty was a sore subject in certain parts, and for good reason. It wasn't that long ago that Jill was a fugitive. Having an FBI badge now didn't necessarily mean all was forgiven in some circles, especially since the vigilante was still part of her identity. Jill broke the law every time she put on this suit. Some in the precinct didn't take kindly to that, or the fact that no one appeared to do anything about it. She understood it. She didn't care for how open they were with their disdain. "Don't matter how many times I see that get up," Stephen said with a shake of his head. "Still ain't used to it." "Sure you don't want your own Earl?" Jill quipped. "Get your cosplay on next time the convention's in town?" Stevens barked in laughter. "Trust me, last thing y'all want's me parading around in black leather." "Stand on the red X," Castillo ordered without turning around. Not that he was rude or lacked social grace, but he had to focus on all 4 monitors to make sure everything went smoothly. Jill tucked a strand of hair behind her ear before thinking better of it. Having her hair down over the front of her face probably added to the effect. Now wasn't the time to look cute. Cute wasn't going to get them any closer to bringing down the collective, to making sure no one else had to suffer such a public, brutal fate as their victims. So she let the locks fall in front of her. It annoyed her, but if it made her look even just a little menacing, she'd put up with it. Castillo's fingers danced along the ergonomic keyboard in his lap. The lights in the tech room went out, bathing Jill and the others in darkness. With the blinds closed to block out the sun, the room was almost entirely pitch black. Ramon and Detective Stevens stood in the corner by the door, exchanging a silent glance as a tiny red light came on just feet in front of Jill. Her posture straightened and her hands balled into fists. Another faint glow of red surfaced on the left side of her face. "Won't that creep you out?" Stevens whispered. "Every damn day," Ramon admitted through clenched teeth. "We should be on in just a few seconds," Castillo announced. "And 3, 2, 1. He tapped a button and grinned against the light bathed over his stubbled face. "We're live." Jill's fists tightened even more until they shook, the leather stretching as far as it would go. She cocked her head just enough so that only her left eye was visible in the monitor. She had enough practice at this that she could get such a look down without needing to study the screen. After all, the hacked WJZ feed was once her best way of communicating with her city. People she never thought truly needed her, but recent events had proven otherwise. She fought the urge to smile, glaring at the red dot in front of her. She lifted her head just enough that her mouth, covered in black lipstick, was visible. Her brother's words echoed through her head about there coming a day when she no longer had to do this. Jill fought against the frown threatening to curl her lips downward sucking in a deep breath and pushing the thought out of her mind. Not now. Not here. Thugs, she began. However many of you there are, that is all you are. Ramon and Stevens exchanged yet another look. Ramon's phone buzzed in that moment, and with one glance at the caller ID display, he sighed, rolled his eyes, and turned his back before answering. Agent Gutierrez. You talk a big game, Jill continued, but at the end of the day, you're hiding behind masks. You strike only when your foe is already bloodied and weak. You disguise not just your faces, but your voices. No one knows who you are or where you are. You lurk in the shadows, all the better to prey on our fears and our mistrust than to come out into the open and lay out your ideas for us. Why? Afraid we won't like what we see? Jill lifted her hands and cracked her knuckles. The titanium wrapped around them made for a god-awful sound, one that still made Ramon cringe every time he heard it. You've already killed twice. For all we know, you're priming your next victim as I speak. You think you've sent us a message, but really all you've done is deprive two families of their loved ones. And for what? To tell us something we already know? Yeah, this city's corrupt. The cops are dirty. The politicians lie. That's been going on for decades, here and elsewhere. This is nothing new, and you're not the first to try doing something about it. Hell, that's why I put on this suit. But let's face it, you're no better than Councilman Franco, or Officer Weir, or Commissioner Saunders. You can tell us how horrible those men are, how their misdeeds justify what you do to them. But you're the exact same. You claim to do good, then turn around and become what you accuse your enemy of being. You are not just. You are not right. You're terrorists, thugs, jackals. And the day this city turns to you for guidance, for justice, is the day this city is finally, truly lost. Stevens leaned in and whispered, She write this shit down first, she come up with it on the fly. Ramon smirked and shook his head, even as he was held hostage by the voice on the other end of his phone. In his mind, this was Bounty at her finest. She wasn't throwing a single punch. She didn't have her sword out. Yet as she stood mere feet from him, giving the collective a message of her own, he couldn't help but admire her even more. Because this, right here, was the perfect embodiment of why she did what she did. If he ever questioned why his partner became Bounty, this made it crystal clear. Right now, Baltimore's finest and some of the smartest federal investigators this side of Washington, D.C. are doing everything in their power to track you down, Jill continued. Maybe that doesn't scare you. Maybe that's exactly what you want. Maybe you've already planned for it. But let me tell you this. You better hope they find you before I do. Because no matter what you may think, they still have rules to follow. They still have lines they can't cross. I don't. Rest assured, you cowards come across me, it'll be the last thing you ever do. Jill took one step forward, inching closer to the camera. At this point, her entire face was covered in shadow. Only her red eye was visible now, and she centered it against the camera. This time, she let the smile creep onto her face, knowing full well no one could see it. Try me. She turned her back to the camera and walked off as the lights came back on. Jill opened the door and stormed out into the bullpen just as Ramon disappeared into the elevator, phone still glued to his ear. She frowned at Detective Stevens, who had been hot on her heels. He couldn't help but chuckle, shaking his head as the pair ducked into the break room. Jill stared out through the blinds on the door. "Jill?" Stephen shook his head. "Don't tell me you're seriously..." "If I had my way, Weir is the last body that falls in all this," she said. "But I need them to think I'm capable of anything." Stephen stood near the busted coffee maker, arms crossed over his chest. "And if you do go toe-to-toe with them?" Again, Jill cracked her knuckles. Stevens flinched. "That's the last thing those bastards want." The door to the break room burst open, Castillo sticking his head in. It took a moment to catch his breath, his eyes wide, frantic. He stared at Jill and shook his head. "We've got another transmission." Betrayal, Book 5 in the Jill Andersen series, is available on Kindle, Nook, Kobo, Apple iBooks, Smashwords, and in paperback. Like what you saw today? Click the like button and subscribe to this channel so you can be notified whenever there's a new video. And be sure to visit jdcuneganbooks.com to check out my work and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Links are down below in the video description. Be safe and be good to each other.